Today's the last class. Time is flying. It went so fast, huh? We only have a pranayama to learn as a new subject for today, which we will do after asana, but we are coming to a conclusion. Maybe you have questions about anything, everything that you learned in this course, but anything about life, or anything you have questions about. I hope that it is clear that yoga is widely misunderstood. Yoga is mostly because of misunderstanding of the essence of yoga. Yoga is mostly presented as a superficial thing. It's focused on many commercial places present yoga just as another exercise. In most places, it is part of the group exercise program in between aerobics and other exercises. There's nothing wrong with that, of course. Exercise is always good. Yoga is always good, even when misunderstood. The only issue that I have with this is that yoga is incredibly valuable for mankind, for the individual, but for mankind as a whole. It will just make the world a better place if more people would have the opportunity to practice and study yoga properly. And as a result of that, the most important part is the transformation that occurs as a result of that. It leads to enormous transformation of the human being. Many people, when they hear the word yoga, they do not realize that yoga is not an exercise, it's not a philosophy, it's a science of life. It gives very deep insight in life, psychology, but psychology on a very practical level. And in contrast with many philosophies and religions, yoga has a very positive message. While many philosophies and religions, which are similar to yoga because they are all based on human contemplation throughout thousands of years of development, because human beings have a tendency to be in a tamas condition, which means a negative tendency of thought, a tendency of negative thought. Throughout the thousands of years, the insights developed mostly about the pain that life causes to people, the suffering that we find on our path throughout our life, is being viewed in a negative way, in a pessimistic way. It is called nihilism. Nihilism means looking at everything from a very negative point of view, thinking that this is the reality, I just have to accept it, I just have to live with it. And that is exactly not what it means. It means that many people who keep themselves busy with philosophy and sciences of life, they have not understood themselves. what it really is about. Yoga, the positive message of yoga is that, yes, life can be a valley of tears, life can hurt, but it is because of ego that you allow yourself to unnecessarily get hurt. It is because of ego that you identify with the hurt, you drown yourself in your misery. If you can overcome that, you will see that every obstacle, every challenge, every pain that you go through in life actually has a positive effect. It makes you stronger, it makes you wiser, it makes you a better human being. It is also ego that makes people not wanting to accept this message. What do you mean? I am hurt, and now you're telling me that that is a positive thing? You're a bad person. But in the end, long story short, every negative turns into a positive if you understand this. If you understand that the essence of yoga is to start doing everything consciously, is to start practicing mindfulness with everything that you do in life, everything. The moment that you start doing that, you become a natural scientist yourself. Because from every little action, every little interaction, you learn something new. You develop new insights about yourself, about other people, about the world around you. And when you can see it like that, life is wonderful. In spite of the misery that we have to go through. Even better, it is possible to develop gratitude towards your misery. When you realize that it is always turning into something positive, that it always leads to growth, development, and the destruction of ignorance. It is ignorance that leads to the misery. If we undergo our misery consciously, meaning that we make the connections, that we see the law of cause and effect at work, it always leads to growth, it always leads to new insights. And when you realize that, it's impossible to keep thinking about challenges, obstacles, and misery, suffering, as a negative. Also, suffering is something that becomes unnecessarily worse when we allow ego to take over and we start feeling sorry for ourselves. Misery is much reduced the moment that we realize that we need to draw some conclusions from it. So for a conscious person like you and me, what happens next time when you are confronted with misery, with suffering, is first you feel the pain. Because you're only human. And the pain has a reason and a purpose. The reason is something is happening that is not right. The purpose is to alert you. The pain tells you, pay attention, something is not going right here. So instead of drowning in the pain and just suffering from the pain passively, which is a tendency that most people have, you feel the pain and you quickly go into the mode of trying to determine what is going on. What happened that led to this? What caused it? Who caused it? And we learned in the philosophy of the kleshas that we must especially look at ourselves instead of blaming other people. That doesn't mean that what other people do is right, correct, but you have no control over what other people do. What you have control over is what you do and how you got into that situation and how you can next time avoid that situation. So yoga is not an exercise. It's not a philosophy. It's a science of life. More precisely, it's the science of the control of life. It's so simple, and yet most people who engage with yoga, also professionals and authorities in yoga, established authorities, they do not know this. And it's the most wonderful part of yoga. The exercise is there to create a new condition. Not only an expanded amount of energy, but that energy being more harmonious, sattvic, leading to the new condition where you possess more insight, wisdom, and consciousness. Energy is the fuel for that process, so it is important to first generate larger amounts of more harmonious energy, and you do that with asana, pranayama, mudra, and of course your meditation. Together that leads to more energy, that is more sattvic, and it very naturally opens up the consciousness. The philosophy is there to help you understand what is happening. The philosophy explains what you can expect in that new condition, the new obstacles that you find, and how to deal with them in a positive and a constructive way. So it's one of the most beautiful sciences in the world, and most people just do not realize that. As I explained, you still remember what I explained at the introduction workshop, what the word yoga means? Yog. It's a direct reference to control. Control of energy, leading to amazing development and transformation. Also, the essence of yoga. I just got a message from a student who went to Hyderabad in India to a place called Heartfulness, and she wrote me that heartfulness is the essence of Patanjali's teaching. And I replied and I said, yeah, that makes sense, because the essence of my teaching also is to follow your heart, to learn to follow your heart. In contradiction with what you learn in the societies that we grow up in, which tells you, don't follow your heart, that's foolish. You will end up no good if you follow your heart. Study hard, work hard, earn lots of money, then buy a house, start a family, and then you will be happy. Following your heart is not easy, but it is the only way to connect with yourself. As long as you do what other people tell you to do, what the government tells you to do, your parents, your teachers tell you to do, you will never find happiness. You may earn money, you may be able to buy a house, but look in your own environment, in your family, your circle of friends. And if you look carefully, you will see that nobody is actually happy. And they have no control over it. They do not understand why. And they are good people. They are good citizens. They contribute to society. They pay taxes. They raise children often. But they're not happy. We need to find a balance, of course. You cannot just isolate yourself and live on the top of Namsan and only just be happy all day, like the Buddha with a big smile on your face. And that is not realistic. Following your heart is reflected in the story of The Road Not Taken. That poem, The Road Not Taken. Only a small percentage of people take the road of the heart. And the majority of the people take the road of the head, which is driven by fear. Fear, doubt, worry, all in Muladhara Chakra, at the basis of our existence. It makes people feel comfortable and stable to take the left road. There are no challenges, there are no obstacles, but there's also no happiness, no joy, no bliss. It's gray. It's tamas. Children are like songbirds. Songbirds with beautifully colored feathers and a beautiful song. Adults lose their beautiful feathers they had when they were a child. They lose their ability to sing a beautiful song. They become gray and dark. It's all about energy. When you follow your heart, your energy goes up. When you follow your head, your energy goes down, and your life is ruled by fear, doubt, and worries. One of the biggest problems in society is people with depression. And we don't know. Most people don't know why they experience depression. And when they go to the doctor also has no answer. The only answer they can come up with is give you some chemical, some pharmaceutical medicine, antidepressant, which is not a solution. Following the heart is not easy. So most people don't have the courage to do that. But as a yogi, you will find more and more that you have no choice. Because you connect with yourself. And not following your heart feels like a betrayal. And it leads to unhappiness and depression. When I was in my mid-20s, I started losing my hair. I started getting bald. You know why? Because I lost my heart. I lost my path. I started with yoga at the age of 20. But had to go back to normal life. School, work, relationship. And it was so depressing. I had to give up my heart. I had to give up my dream. I was dying inside. And it started with losing my hair. Now, another story is many men, they are very scared of losing hair. I never cared anything about it. It's totally not important. What is important is how you feel, not what you look like. As a yogi, every time I lost my heart, I was forced to get back on track again. It happened several times in the past 40 years. It's a tragedy, but that is because it's not easy to follow your heart. It's not easy to always be conscious. It's not easy to always avoid situations where you depend on other people. In a relationship, for example, or when you work in a company that pays your salary, with which you can pay your rent and everything that you spend. It's very difficult to ignore that or to deny that. But you get better and better at it. And that is what makes yoga beautiful, and that is what makes life beautiful. People think you're crazy. Your family, your friends, they think you're crazy. Because they do not understand that to you it all makes sense. What makes sense to them is money. What makes sense to them is stability. To have a house as a foundation with a partner and children and a good job. For most people, that's it. And it is important, but it doesn't work like that anymore for people like you and me. It kills the spirit. What keeps the spirit alive is following your heart. When you feel enthusiastic, when you feel motivated, when you feel inspired. We live in a world where you are told not to follow your feeling. Where we are told that emotions are bad. When you're emotional, you're unstable, they will say. But emotions, the more energy you have, the more emotion you will experience. That's how it works. So one of the issues that yogis have to deal with, because you are generating more energy, inevitably you will experience more emotions, stronger emotions. Now, if you just suffer from your emotions, then it is very negative, of course. But if you start paying attention to what these emotions are trying to tell you, then it enriches you. And it helps you to grow and develop. But it is not easy to be on this path. And I always tell my students, during the class, during the course, but especially at the end, that I'm responsible for the changes that you go through. I feel responsible for that. And with the end of this course, that does not mean that my responsibility ends. If ever you find yourself dealing with challenges or questions that you can't answer, you can always contact me. Until the last day of my life, that is my commitment that I make to all my students. I'm very skillful at, when you contact me, I prefer that you do that by email so that I can soak up the content, so that I can contemplate your situation. And I always reply. But I need a couple of days to look at the situation from left and right and back and front. And I've developed the skill to just directly come to the essence of the issue that you're dealing with and give very simple and practical advice. Often it is just something that you fail to see, and just with a little push, the essence of what you're dealing with becomes visible, and with that there is no problem anymore. The moment that you catch the essence of something, it's not a problem anymore. The answer is there. And the difficulty that we are facing sometimes is that we just fail to see what we are dealing with. And the more we think about it, the more complicated it becomes. At the moment that you detach, that you surrender, you start to breathe again, your energy starts to circulate again, you develop insight. You connect with the essence of what you're dealing with. That is also the value of meditation, is that it allows you to let go, to release the tension of your thought processes, allowing the crown chakra to then provide you with deep insights. So anyway, that's my commitment to you, that you can always drop me a line whenever you feel the need. About feeling and emotion, you have noticed with the last major exercise that we learned that we actually use feeling. We use sentiment to stimulate, generate energy in each of the chakras individually. That is very powerful in fueling the crown chakra. As energy expands, and when energy expands, it also rises up. So we use feeling. While society tells you that feeling and emotion is not good, it is actually very powerful. It is actually more powerful than thought. That doesn't mean that we don't need thought. Thought helps us to rationalize things, including emotions and feelings. So thought is important, but it's not the only important thing. If we can combine it with feeling and emotion, we become a whole human being. The highest level, and this is why I'm telling you this, the highest level of meditation is called Samadhi, and it is fueled by feeling. And what is the fourth one? I forgot the fourth one. It's somewhere in the Asmita. These are the 4 samadhis. Now, throughout the course, I have tried to draw your attention to a certain structure that comes back in everything you do in yoga. Yoga starts with creating rajas. So every first exercise, whether it's pranayama or mudra, and in asana, of course, you're always generating rajas in a balanced way, in a controlled way. A human being has a tendency to always gravitate to the bottom, tamas. So the first step in developing in yoga is to start getting away from that tendency to be in tamas. So everything starts with rajas. Vichara samadhi, Actually, this is, if you look at this, it seems like there are 4 Samadhi exercises. But actually, it is one process. So it's one exercise. But you learn it step by step. Vichara is the first step, and it is designed to create rajas. But it is the last step of your meditation. So when you arrive at Samadhi, you have done your asana, properly of course, pranayama, a mudra, and then you build up deep concentration so that you can start Samadhi. So by the time you start with Samadhi, you're already 1 hour in your meditation. So it's very controlled. You introduce rajas in that high or deep meditation by invoking a sense of excitement. Vichara is joy. But how we generate joy is by thinking of something that really impresses, that really makes you like a little child. Like a little child a wow feeling. Little children, as an adult you have seen many things in the world, but little children, there's always a first time when you see something. So when you look at a child who is looking at the world around them, very often they are very excited. Mommy, look at that, look, wow. That excitement, that wow feeling. When I go back home, Amsterdam, I always visit my wow tree. There is a forest on the outside between the Schiphol airport and Amsterdam. There's a huge forest, man-made, but it's huge. And there is an oak tree there, somewhere hidden a little bit. There's an oak tree there, it's very old. And it is huge. The stem is just huge. And the branches of the tree are as big as trees. So very impressive. I always have to, that's my tree. That gives me a wow feeling. I just admire that tree. Admiration. That is the admiration that you learn. If you learn real prayer in a religion, real prayer is Samadhi. And it starts with admiration. Admiration for God, they will then say. But that is religion. We are yogis. We apply this in daily life. If you like cars, you see a beautiful car. Then you say, wow, what a beautiful car. You don't do that because you think other people will judge you. I don't care what other people say. Today it was snowing, right? Throughout the years, unfortunately we don't have windows here, but when we have studios with windows, when the first snow comes, I walk to the window and I say, wow, look at this. Because I love, it's magical to see the first snow coming down. And many times people have said, teacher, you are so childish. They think that being childish is negative. I think that being childish is positive. If you're a real yogi, there is a child in you. Because that is where all the valuable energy is. That is why children are like ping pong balls. They are full of energy. And adults, they are like a deflated ball. They don't have that energy anymore. Unless you practice yoga. And unless you understand, this is not a bad thing. To be enthusiastic about something. And to show it. So joy. Wow feeling. That is rajas. Rajas is, of course, not good. We want sattva. So the next step is ananda. Do you recognize this word, ananda? Yeah, it's the highest stage of development for a yogi. Yoga Anand Saraswati. The many of the advanced yogis, many authors of books, they have Anand or Ananda in their name. But that's not how they were born. Throughout their life, throughout their yoga life, they develop, and every time they reach a new development, their name changes. In the end, they add Ananda to your name, which is bliss. It's the opposite of joy. It's bliss. Bliss is love. When your heart melts, when you see a butterfly in the park going from one flower to another flower in the spring, when you see a child playing in the playground, full of joy and laughter, it can make your heart melt. That is bliss. Or the love that you feel for a person. But it has to be pure. Not based on conditions. It's unconditional love, bliss. In religion, they use the image of Mother Maria. Mother Maria, who gave birth to the Son of God without sex. They create that image for people to admire, to feel love. But we do that with simple daily things, not with fake images. So, when you understand this, you start looking at life and daily life occurrences in a different way. Just like with the snow, that most people just ignore it because it's childish if you pay attention to it. People also do not see the beauty in just very small things, like a mouse. People think mouse are scary and creepy and have to be killed. But look at a mouse from close by and you see a tiny little creature that has a purpose in this life. It can melt your heart. A cat or a dog or a little child playing around, just doing their thing, just being a child. There are so many situations that actually have the potential to bring you to higher levels of consciousness. Being impressed by things, the wow feeling leading to rajas, or being impressed by things that melt your heart, which is tamas. And of course, the purpose of doing this is first you go up with the joy, rajas, then you come to the middle, sattva, with bliss, ananda, which then leads to your ability to vitarka. Vitarka is reasoning. It's a little bit superficial in the beginning when you learn vitarka, but you learn vitarka by, after vichara and ananda, you introduce an issue that you are dealing with in your thought process. But this is not just just reasoning. It is reasoning while you are in a very deep meditation. So in vitarka, if you have a problem in your life that you're dealing with, maybe professionally, in your work, working on a project and it's very complex and you need to solve some issue that's very difficult to solve and other people also don't know the answer, you do that in vitarka. So while you are meditating, you build up carefully the sattva in a very deep meditation, and then you insert, very deliberately, you insert that particular issue that you need answers for. The problem is the thought process. You have to, if you do this correctly, you are not thinking anymore. You rise above the thought and you start looking at the issue from above. So we call this also the helicopter view. Helicopter can fly without moving, so it just rises above, and from above, hovering above the problem, you can clearly see the essence of what you're dealing with. So this is where you become a troubleshooter. You become very skillful at solving problems. It's a very good skill for managers. But it helps me to give you insight in any kind of problem that you are dealing with on a personal level also. So, I don't know what to call the helicopter view. Rationalizing is not entirely correct, but then asmita, that is where you end up here. You are totally sattvic. Asmita. Asmi means I am. So here you are totally one with your soul, with Atman, with Purusha. Totally thoughtless and one with the universe. It is very difficult to explain. This is why there is so much mystery surrounding Samadhi. But in the end, Samadhi is just pure contemplation. If you have to explain it, it can appear to be overwhelming or complicated, but it is not. It's a natural process. It's all about energy. You use energy to come to a very deep sattva, and your crown chakra will do the rest. When you practice yoga regularly, you find yourself in this condition sometimes when you're daydreaming. That can happen while you are riding a subway, and you just have some moments of thoughtlessness where you're not on social media or reading the news or so, and just staring at a spot on the wall or the ceiling or something, or is often that happens spontaneously. Children are often daydreaming. Adults lose that ability. Same story. As a yogi, you will get that ability back. You will become a daydreamer again. And people will say that's bad, but you know that it's not, because the moment that you're daydreaming, you're not in your physical body anymore. You are in this condition where you are connected with the universe, where children who daydream have much deeper insights than children who are not daydreaming. Teachers in school, they punish children who daydream because they think they are distracted. But children who daydream, they may not look directly at the teacher, but they soak up everything that the teacher is telling them. And while the teacher is teaching, in the condition of daydreaming, the child is processing all that at a very high rate. That is why children can sometimes ask amazing questions that you think, oh my goodness, where did that come from? That's because in their daydreaming capacity, they see things that children who don't daydream, they don't see that. They just stick to the material they have to learn. So teachers should not punish kids who are daydreaming. They should stimulate it. Because that is where you contemplate, and that's where you understand matter very deeply. And that is also the purpose of Samadhi. You become a natural scientist. Ancient sciences, like astronomy, astrology, but also chemistry and what have you, alchemy, that's all based on the ability to contemplate. So ancient scientists were people who, at first, their first and most important ability was spirituality, the ability to contemplate. Everything, all the insights in the past were created, were developed in Asmita Samadhi. I don't know what to call it. Contemplation, pure contemplation. Or slash connection with essence. Why am I telling you this? Because we're talking about feeling and emotion. And the highest level of meditation starts with wow and your heart melting. So feeling things and being excited about things and enthusiastic is not childish at all. Actually, I dare say it's very mature if you have the courage to allow that while everybody thinks that it's negative or bad. So enjoy life. Enjoy the little things, because it's the little things that can bring you there. And it's for free. Just look around and you can see it everywhere, even in a big city like Seoul. It's very interesting if you compare big cities with the countryside. We need yoga to smile, to feel good. You go to the countryside, people are always smiling and friendly. But as a yogi, you can be in that condition as people in the countryside in a city with 20 million people. With concrete and asphalt and everybody stressed and busy and crazy, rat race going on. You can be as happy and peaceful as the people in the countryside. People in the countryside, they naturally experience this. They're surrounded by quietness, nature, beauty. We have to create it in a big city, like so. But if you look around, you find it in a big city too. Questions about all this?
When you reach certain level in your Nada meditation, you know that by these signs of emotion rising up in your calm mind, that...
No. Yes. When you meditate regularly, it's much easier to experience joy and bliss, because it's all about energy. And joy and bliss are emotions in the crown chakra. But this is a very controlled way, if you want to control the process. But people who meditate regularly on nada, extended meditations, they will naturally end up in Asmita. This is more effective because you take control. But if you meditate and you meditate extended, you do extended meditation, close to an hour or even more, you will just naturally, you will end up in Asmita. It's just more efficient and faster if you go through the process. Going through the process is actually something that you do for a period of time. to create a new habit, a new condition. And that applies to pranayama too, and mudra. At some point, you have created a new condition. There's no urgent need anymore to do that. It happens naturally. But if you meditate, you eventually end up in that condition spontaneously. It's just yoga is a science of control. If you wait for daydream, it always depends on circumstances. While with yoga, you create the circumstances. Wherever and whenever and however.
Until now, we have done lots of things, lots of types of pranayama and mudra, and also you introduced Samadhi as well today. So when I practice pranayama at home, I cannot go through every single thing that we did in a day, right?
No.
So I don't know how can I do it at home? Let's say maybe certain period of time this week I practice this pranayama, ujjayi pranayama.
Yes.
Should I do it depends on my condition. Or today I will do this one, but next day I switch to this one. Which way is the?
In the beginning stages, you approach it very systematically.
Mm-hmm.
So, for 2 weeks you do Nadi Shodhana.
Yeah.
Then for 2 weeks you do Surya Vedana. Then for 2 weeks you do Ujjayi. For 2 weeks you do Shitkari. For 2 weeks you do Shitali. And then you start again.
Okay.
2 weeks Nadi Shodhana. 2 weeks. That is how you create a new condition. It's very systematic and very powerful. Eventually, you do pranayama based on the feeling of need. So when you come home after a day of being very busy, you're tired. Well, most people are not motivated to do any exercise then, but if you have the discipline and you do pranayama, you will notice that if you do Surya Vedana, you become more exhausted because you add rajas to rajas, increasing your exhaustion. While if you do Shitkari, it refreshes you. It makes you feel rested after the meditation. And that is not subtle. That is very, very clear and very obvious. When you're tired, you do Surya Vedana Pranayama, you become more tired. And not in a subtle way, very, very strongly. People who are tired and do Surya Vedana Pranayama, they start nodding and they fall asleep in the meditation. Do Shitkari and you allow your fatigue to recover. You allow yourself to recover from it because Shiva energy is responsible for recovering. So in the beginning you approach it systematically regardless of your condition until you start to develop insight in your condition and how the pranayama influences your condition. And then you can say, when you're very tired, you choose Shitkari. But when you're very, very lethargic, very lazy, very, then you need Shakti. So you choose Surya Vedana. Yeah? Just experiment. The most powerful way of dealing with this is just playing, experimenting. Dare to experiment. Do not be afraid of making mistakes. It is by experimenting that you learn the most and the fastest. All right?
So in the book, there's supposed to be different sounds to nada. You're supposed to hear like drums and bells.
Yeah. The kettle drums and the bells, that is actually an exercise in itself. You don't hear them spontaneously, you imagine those sounds to develop an even deeper meditation. That is being taught in our advanced course. But in the end, you end up with nada. The flute is nada. Does it make sense if I say, you know, one of the things that I always include in the final class, this is only a small group, but often people most people are only interested in learning, but some people want to teach yoga also. And people then ask, do you have any advice if I want to teach? What is the best way to teach and how should I teach? And if you look at most yoga teachers, they are standard. They do exactly what they were taught in their teacher training course. So when you hear different kinds of teachers talk to the members in their class, they say exactly the same things in the same tone of voice. It's creepy, actually, because it is in contradiction with the aim of yoga to allow us to connect with our individuality, with our heart's content. What they do in the modern teacher training courses is they create robots who are all the same. And it is in total contradiction with yoga. Totally the opposite of what yoga tries to achieve. So, if you want to teach, just be yourself. Whatever that is, just be yourself. Don't try to be something. Don't try to copy somebody. Or don't try to think that you must do like this and that because people expect that. No, be yourself and be unique in the way that you are. And people feel the difference. The people that come to your class may not be like other classes, but people come to your class and they go to another class, they feel the difference. They feel that you're genuine. And that is much more attractive than a robot that says exactly the same things as every other teacher on the schedule. And the name of the class is different. The kind of yoga that they teach is different, but in essence it's all the same. Just be yourself. And not everybody understands that, but there are people that will feel attracted to come to your class, and those people are the ones that need it. It's the ones that are already more sensitive and conscious than other people, and they are looking for more depth, and they are looking for answers maybe also. And if you start acting like a robot, you have nothing to offer to them. And it's not only about teaching yoga and towards your students, also to yourself. Be yourself. That is truthfulness. Truthfulness is the second of the yamas. And self-study. Self-study leads to you being yourself. It's not easy, but you must stop caring about what other people think of you. And I know in Korean society that's very difficult, because Korean society is very judgmental, very harsh. But we have to rise above that for our own happiness. People have judged me, and then I ask, Okay, so you think what I'm doing is wrong, but it makes me happy. So, if I stop doing what I'm doing that makes me happy, are you going to make me happy? No? Okay, then I will continue doing what makes me happy. If you can give me an alternative and make me happy, I will gladly go along with that. But, people are judgmental. You have a relationship with the age difference, people say, oh, the age difference, that's not correct. And yeah, it makes me happy. And we are both happy. Are you going to make me happy? Okay, then mind your own business. You have no right to judge me. But I know that's very hard in a very harshly judgmental society. But we are going to change that. You are going to change that. Now this is a whole other story, but you know Hong Sok-chon? When I came to Korea in 1997, he was on TV all the time, in many different programs. He was a comedian, he was an interesting personality, he had charisma. And the moment that I saw him, I said, this guy is gay. And Korean people said, no, he's not gay. There are no gay people in Korea. Now, when I had classes in Itaewon, in 1999, before I had my own studio, I had classes in many different places, but in Itaewon I started teaching teacher training course in a gym. I just rented a room there several times a week, and on Saturdays I would do a teacher training course there. And Hong Sok-chon was a member at that gym. And while showering, we were talking about, at that time he didn't come out yet, so nobody knew that he was gay, but I knew. He told me that he had a boyfriend who was Dutch, so he felt connected with me because I'm Dutch also. And the sad thing is that a couple of years later, he came out of the closet and he lost all his TV work. They canceled him. Very sad, very tragic. He dealt with that he became an entrepreneur. He started all kinds of bars and restaurants in Itaewon. Only 9 years later, he started coming back to TV again. But why I'm telling you about this is, you are like Hong Sok-chon in a much less dramatic way, and not because of your sexuality, but because of your consciousness. Hong Sok-chon broke the rules to change society, but for his own happiness. It made him temporarily unhappy, of course. It destroyed his career, everything that he was enthusiastic about. He was a true entertainer, and he couldn't do that anymore. But because he came out of the closet, he changed perception in society. There are now many people in Korea who are openly gay. It's not perfect yet, it's not complete yet, but there are now many people who are openly gay because of Hong Sok-chon. So whenever he thinks about the difficulties that he went through, he can be proud of himself for having brought about that change. Without people like him who have the courage, nothing changes. You will run into difficulties too, just because you want to be yourself. Whatever that is. And people will judge you, sometimes harshly, for the choices that you make. But people will also quietly admire you, and take an example from you. And that is how we have our own small influence in changing this world, in making this world a better place. Just be yourself for your own happiness, but in the end, it does influence your surroundings as well in a positive way. But the reason why I'm talking about this is not easy because it comes with obstacles. It comes with judgment. Sometimes very harsh judgment. And it is up to you to choose not to be affected by that. Questions? All right. Well, it's about time to have a short break. Thank you so much.